Welcome to Cinema and Suds.
I'm Roger Cropley.
And I'm David Jester.
And we're here with Billy Hanson.
Welcome, Billy.
Thank you very much for having me, guys.
Thank you for coming on.
So, my first question is, you're from Maine, and you made the decision to go to LA. What prompted that decision?
I've been pretty lucky for a lot of my life to know kind of where I was headed for a very long time. Like, since I was a little kid, I've just wanted to make movies. And so I kind of knew that's where I'd end up eventually, no matter what. And so after high school, I went down to Florida State Film School, and I was there for 4 years. And then, the next logical step was LA. That's where they were making all the movies at the time. So I've kind of always been on that trajectory.
So what was your concentration in college?
Yeah.
So I got into the film school at Florida State, which is basically run like a production company. And so they do a pretty intense program that puts you right in the middle of it. So you're writing and directing your own projects, and you're also like crewing and staffing other people's projects. So you get a really good, well-rounded education for a set. So I did every single job that exists on a film set multiple times during my time at school. So they don't really let you focus on one or the other. They kind of say you're going to learn all of it in that school. But for me, I knew I wanted to write and direct. I knew I wanted to be the one like driving story and sort of crafting story through the whole thing. So I knew I wanted to write and direct, but I learned everything. I loved cinematography. I learned how much I love editing. So I kind of took all of that out to LA with me, even though I knew I wanted to be a writer-director.
Once you got to LA, what was your first position that you had?
The very first one was I got hired at a store in Beverly Hills, and it was like this really posh, overpriced little gift shop, basically, that had all these little trinkets, and the other half of the store was super expensive stationery. It was not what I wanted to be doing. That was I just got to LA and I need money job. But the first industry job I got, which was probably 6 to 8 months after that, I got hired as a post PA at Nickelodeon. And so I was on some of their flagship shows like iCarly. I was there right at the end of Zoe 101 and Drake and Josh, and then iCarly and Victorious. So it's when they were sort of at the height of everything.
So you started there as like a PA, post PA, and you moved up through the ranks, I assume?
Yeah, that started what became a very long post career. I started out in the post-production department, so working with editors, working with all of the sound mixers, all the graphics people, all the color correction people, and I really learned how a department like that functions, and I learned the ins and outs of the technology, which was really important too, because right at that time, that was around 2008, and digital was really taking everything over, and you had to learn all these new processes and these new programs, and it's tough. I was mostly a runner. That was my main job when I was there, was basically driving tapes back and forth all over town from our lot over to the color correction place, which was down in Hollywood, and then another place that was up in Burbank for our sound mixing. And it was cool to be able to see all the different facilities and really get a handle on how the town works, overall. And find the nerve centers of the town, which is very cool. And it also gave me, hands-on experience with showrunners, the people in charge. I wasn't really in the conversations, but I was around them quite a bit to see how they made decisions and how money got spent. Really was a big part of that too. But it was a really good education, and that. I was in post there for I think 5 years. I left for a brief time in the middle and then ended up going back. By the time I left there, I was a post coordinator, but it was one of those situations where I was a coordinator, but I was doing a lot of the work of a supervisor and even a producer in some capacities. So I left there and I went to a company called Triage, and they were doing a ton of unscripted TV. And so they had a bunch of different shows that I was on there. And when I was there, I was a post supervisor. So I was kind of not running the department, but overseeing the whole post process, basically, for individual shows at the time.
I have a question about reality TV. So how unscripted really is it?
It depends show to show. I was on some where they were literally like, it's just a docu-follow series, and like one of them was Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders. So that one it's pretty unscripted. You know, they have to follow the people, and they figure out the stories as they're going, so they know who to follow and who to track and who has interesting stories and whatever. But for the most part, they're getting what they can. When it comes to interviews, they'll say things like, "Oh, do that again, say that clearer," or like, "Can you make your point again, but say it this way?" So it's a nice mixture of like actually getting the reality of it and making sure it's clear enough for TV. But then I was also on a lot of the cooking shows that Food Network was doing, and those are they do a lot of work to protect the contest and the competition to make sure everything's fair and all that. But there are definitely I don't want to say staged moments, but moments they expect. Let's put it that way.
What's been your favorite to work? Like all of this, and I don't mean like favorite show, but like, reality or, scripted or film. Like what's been your favorite to work in?
Well, most of the time, the reality stuff, I actually did like it quite a bit. It wasn't like my position as post super, it was all calendars, budgets, and like workflow management. So it was nothing creative. But you get into a rhythm with those things, and it is interesting to watch the editors and the producers build a show out of sort of like hundreds of hours of content of footage to craft a 43-minute episode out of that. Like that's really fascinating to watch. So I did really enjoy working on those shows. I mean, my preference if I had to choose one thing that I like the best, it's absolutely working in movies because it's so potent, really. Like you're really intense on this one thing for a long time. And most of the time I work on movies, I'm writing or directing, and it's full creative. So that's absolutely my preference. But if it's what jobs have I worked that I've liked the best, I think the reality stuff was better. The scripted stuff on the flagship Nickelodeon shows, the pressure's too much, man. The stakes are too high. Because I remember as a PA, there was a day we were doing an iCarly movie, and I was sent over to a post facility. We had pushed our deadline so close to air that we were delivering it the same day it was going to air. But we had to deliver. We were in LA. We had to deliver to the network in New York. So we had to bring this tape, or I had to bring this tape on a Saturday to the facility so they could do a fiber optic transfer. So we were playing it in LA. They were recording it in New York so that they could air it that night. And so I had to sit in the facility, watch this little monitor, the entire 80-minute episode. And if anything glitched or went wrong, we had to start it over. And so I'm just watching high stakes. My heart is pounding the whole time, because it was very possible we were going to miss it. But we didn't. Within 2 hours, we were within 2 hours of air.
Wow!
Did you have to restart at any time?
Yes, one time. We had to, because there was a big dropout in the picture. No. But yeah, the stakes are just too high, man. Everyone's moving too fast. Everyone's too stressed out, and that was a tough gig. Yeah. But I learned that I don't really want to do post in scripted TV.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, transitioning to film, since we're talking about that, you're one of the filmmakers we've had on here that have a connection to the Stephen King Dollar Baby program. And you really bring these talents to the film that you make. So let's talk about the film that you made for that program.
So for the Dollar Baby program, I made Survivor Type, which was... Even my wife was like, "You're sure you want to make that one? That was crazy." But I just remember I had... so while I was doing the post thing, that was absolutely the money job. It was the not creative thing. Mm-hmm. So I was just dying to do something creative of my own. And I'd heard of the Dollar Baby program, but I hadn't really looked into it. So when I looked into it, I said, "Oh, Survivor Type. I know that one. Someone told me about it." So I read it. And I was up that whole night after that, because I was that story hit me like a ton of bricks. And I said, I think I want to adapt that because that's that's on his list of available Dollar Baby stories. And I just kind of dove into it. So I adapted it and went and we shot over 4 days in Malibu on this rock that juts really far out into the water. So you can shoot 3 sides of it and make it look like it's, in the middle of the ocean. We cast a really great actor named Gideon Emery, and he does a lot of video game voice work and motion capture stuff.
Oh, okay.
But he was also in Daredevil, the Netflix Daredevil. So he was like solid actor, came out to do this little short, and he just absolutely knocks it out of the park. But a lot of my post knowledge really came in handy with that one because it was just me doing the whole thing top to bottom. And there's some really gnarly practical effects in there.
Yes, there are.
Yeah, I mean, that was before I wouldn't have had the capability to do any of it digital anyway. So the practical effects, that was kind of the first thing that we figured out. When I was talking to the guy producing with me, I said, like, if we don't get the makeup effects right, then the whole movie's kind of shot. Like, that's what we have to get right first. So we hired a guy named Doug Murphy, and he was working on Dexter at the time, or had just wrapped Dexter. So he knew how to do all the molds and make like hyper realistic body parts, basically. And I walked him through all the gags I wanted to do. And, we interviewed a few makeup people, and he was the only one who looked at my ideas and read the script and wasn't intimidated by it. He was the one that was like, "Oh, that's going to be awesome. Okay, that's going to be really cool." So I said, "Okay, yeah, you're the guy. You're the guy to do this." Because if we had approached it with any sort of hesitation, it just wouldn't have gone well. We really had to take some big swings, and the reception to it has been kind of amazing. I can't believe we're still talking about it all this time later.
Well, I have to say, I've read the story. I, love Skeleton Crew, the collection of stories that it's in. And one of the things that really spoke to me was the way that you translated, that story to the video without exposition. And you did such a phenomenal job of, like, the opening of this VHS showing the speaker, the lecturer, talking about post-trauma and like trauma shock and, for doctors and surgeons. And that's like a big thing in the story. And you did such a good job of like just putting these in there without making it overt.
Well, thanks, man. I really appreciate that.
The acting was just amazing. He pulled that off incredibly.
Yeah, man. And from the audition process, like, he was a clear front runner. He just had a really good handle on not just the intense stuff, but the slow decline of the character, from a starting point to a middle point to an ending point. And he had crafted the whole journey on his own. A lot of it, we went over the script quite a bit, but he did so much of that heavy lifting himself. And I directed him very little, when we were on set, because he was just giving his all. And I was like, what am I going to tell him to do? He's doing it. But I noticed in editing, when I was really putting it all together, that he was dropping little hints, in the early scenes that he himself in his performance was going to reference later on. But in the beginning, it's like he's being funny and he's being sort of cocky and brash. But on the back end, he's doing sort of the same things, but it reads as like mania, and he's losing his mind and he's going crazy. And I just saw how great and well crafted his performance was in the editing room, and ever since then, I think that's what most people talk about, is the makeup effects and Gideon's performance in that movie.
I think we've been talking long enough without a beer, so I think it's time to crack one open.
Perfect.
Yeah, what do we got to drink first?
Oh, is that up to me to decide?
Yeah, it's up to you.
Yeah. Listen, we're all Mainers. Let's start with an Allagash.
Allagash White.
Allagash.
It is one of the best beers in Maine, I think.
Whoa. Shots fired. Shots fired. Wow. One of the best in Maine?
Yeah, one of the best.
I mean, I'm not shitting on Allagash White. I think it's a great beer. But one of the best?
Yeah.
See, I'm a stout fan myself, so I think Allagash Black, I could have gotten behind that, but I don't even think they make Allagash Black anymore.
Really?
Yeah, I don't think that's a thing. I know, I miss the days. You would get Allagash Black and Allagash White at a bar, and like people would go crazy for like both of them. You don't see it anymore.
Black?
There was. Oh yeah, it was like, so they originally had white and black.
I've never had the black.
Oh, it was
Yeah,
Belgian
same.
stout, so good. All right.
David's
guess
our
what?
Oh, right.
beer aficionado.
I mean, I just like to drink. If drinking makes you an aficionado, then sure.
I think it counts.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think
Cheers,
you've
guys.
tasted a lot more beers than I have.
Cheers.
Since you go to that bar and have the chalice and the
No,
vault.
Novari Res. I do
Yeah.
have a chalice at Novari Res. I didn't drink the 242 beers there. Yeah, not at once, because that would have killed me. Yeah, so, we're drinking Allagash White right now. Roger says it's one of the best beers in the state of Maine. That's debatable, but I think it's a damn good beer, right? Allagash Brewery has been around for a long time.
Yeah.
Billy, why'd you choose this beer?
Okay, so I don't remember the first time I had it, but I remember trying it because it's called Allagash. And I was born up in northern Maine. I lived up there for a long time near the Allagash. And I was like, oh, well, I have to try. And I was out in LA when I saw it. So I said, oh, I have to try it. And when I tried it, I realized very quickly, oh, this is like a lot of flavor. So I had to adjust to it a little bit and just sort of like, adjust my expectations for it. But, ever since then, I just keep going back to it and keep going back to it. It's so flavorful. And I think I don't drink a lot of beer as I'm getting older. If I do drink beer, it's more flavorful stuff. It's not like light beer or it's whatever. I sort of drink with purpose. And so when I drink Allagash, it's very much like this is a big drink that I'm going to have. So yeah.
Yeah, you're not going to do a keg stand with this.
I've tried. Don't do it. But that's the kind of beer that I tend to like lean toward now these days. Is a lot more flavorful and a lot more bold and intentional with flavor.
Yeah. And I do have to agree with Roger. I think it is one of the best beers in the state of Maine. Also, Allagash Brewery's growth in the last, I think it's like 10 years. They're one of like the largest growing breweries in the United States. Yeah. And, that shows in their beer. Like you're saying, very intentional, very like strong flavors. It's just good. Like, man, I don't know of a beer that they make that I don't like.
Yeah, I've tried most of them. I found out when I was up there making Bone Cold, this is a bigger story. We were up there shooting Bone Cold. We were looking for kind of partners to partner with in Maine, like to specifically partner with Maine businesses. We spoke to Allagash, and we were trying to figure out like maybe we can do like a party, like an after party or something like that, and have Allagash host it or just have Allagash beer there. And they told us that their two biggest markets were Portland, Maine, and Los Angeles. And I was like, well, that's perfect. Yeah, so I thought that was really interesting, just to have those two places that I live being their biggest market. So of course it's one of my favorites.
Yeah, perfect. Well, since you brought it up, let's talk about Bone Cold.
Yeah.
So you started off writing that, right? That was written by you and directed by you, and
that was a project that was born out of. I don't want to say frustration, but that's kind of what it was. I had been working in post for over 10 years, and I had gotten a handful of smaller projects off the ground. None of them really put me on the map. Survivor Type was the biggest thing I had done to that point, and that was a project that I couldn't sell and couldn't distribute and couldn't get out there publicly. So, I was getting increasingly frustrated with my career and how things weren't working out. And I spoke to a friend of mine who was a producer, and he asked me just sort of point blank, like, what's your next goal? And I said, well, I'm ready to write and direct a feature. I'm like at that point. And he said, well, great. Then that's what you do. Like, no matter what, you're going to write and direct a feature next. And he said, it doesn't matter if it's a $1,000, VHS feature. It doesn't matter. Like, you're going to make something cool. So that's what you should do. And so he said, like, reverse engineer a project, that you can look at your assets that you have, not just money, but like people, friends, equipment, locations, any of that stuff, and tell a story using those. And so that's kind of what Bone Cold started as. I said to myself, like, I know I can get the woods of Maine in winter And that's like production value out the roof. That's what a lot of people don't have right away. So I kind of started there and built it out from there. I started telling this story about, the image that popped into my head at that point was this one guy running through the snowy woods, and there's a creature behind him in the distance. And that's what got the wheels turning. And I started saying, okay, who's this guy? What is that monster? Why is it chasing him? And as I started to pull it apart, the story kind of revealed itself a little bit. And yeah, out came this action, psychological horror thriller thing.
Now, where in Maine did you film it?
We were up in Parsonsfield. A friend of the family had, I think it was like 85 acres or something. And he basically was like, you guys can do whatever you want out there. And so we just kind of took over this section of woods for a long time. And then there was some land behind my mom's house, of all places. There's like a patch of woods that was kind of perfect, and it looked different enough from the other place that we were at, and really gave us the impression that we were shooting these miles and miles and miles of woods. And then we did one day shooting in Portland.
Okay.
So that was the main stuff. Everything in the woods is out in Maine, and then there's a scene on a bus in the beginning of the film that's in Maine, and then the rest of it, we had a lot of stuff inside the house. That was all shot in LA.
Okay.
And let me tell you, somehow it was easier to shoot in the middle of the woods in winter than it was to shoot inside of a house in Los Angeles. It was... I don't know how that's possible, but it absolutely was a lot easier.
Wow.
So what about it was easier to film in Maine?
Well, just speaking of dollars and cents, I think so. You don't have to pay for a permit in the woods. You would just have to pay for like blocking off a street, or in the city of Portland, we had to pay $100 for the day. And after that permit, they were like, do you guys want us to block off any streets? Do you need any added security for police officers? And we were like, no, we're okay. We just need to go shoot over here in this like parking lot, basically. And conversely, in LA, we had to pay $900 to shoot inside of a friend's private property. So like, it's, when you compare that, it's a lot harder to shoot out there. Yeah. But there's also like, when we were out in Maine, you just don't have control of things. You don't control the lighting as much as you want to. Right. When you're in a house, you have to control the lighting and really craft something. So it just takes a little more time, a bigger crew and all that. But yeah, I was sort of amazed when we came back to LA to shoot the rest of that stuff. Like, why is this so much harder? It's warm here.
So in Maine, did you have a skeleton crew? Like, was it really pared down, especially with like where you were, out in the cold? I mean, just putting people out there like that.
Yeah, it was written in such a way that we wanted to keep everything really stripped down. I think for the majority of the shoot, we had 8 people, cast and crew.
Wow.
But small. It was. I wrote it and sort of did pre-production so that we could be, a small crew that can be move quickly and that can. Roll with whatever punches come in. And we had a lot of curveballs thrown at us, but I think because we didn't have this large crew that we had to account for, it was a lot easier to manage that stuff. And, the pressure really came down to me as the storyteller, like what's going to work. And we're like, okay, what do we have now? How do we make this moment work? Like we had a whole scene crafted with ghillie suits that were supposed to come in, and they just happened to ship to my LA location instead of in Maine. And I was like, well, I don't have time to order new ones. Ghillie suits are gone. How do we make this work?
Right.
But being that flexible and being able to roll with the punches like that, the small crew really made it work.
Now, was that a 2-camera shoot, or was that just all one camera?
Nope, just one
camera.
Yeah. I wish we had 2 cameras. That would have been awesome. But yeah, we had to be really careful and really selective with what we were doing. Through the action scenes as well as a lot of the dialogue stuff, because there's a lot of dialogue. It's basically 2 guys for the whole movie, and it's just the conversations between the 2 of them. So,
yeah. Now, where did the idea for the creature come from? Like, what exactly it looked like and that kind of stuff?
So for the creature, I called a friend of mine I'd worked with before named Brian Hillard, and he has done some big stuff. He did some work on The Walking Dead. He's worked with like Tarantino doing bullet hits and that kind of, a lot of the blood spurting from Django was his stuff. And he also
And that's some blood spurting.
Oh yeah, big time, big time. So he knows what he's doing. And I spoke to him, and the story is a lot about PTSD and how it's formed, how it presents itself, and the effects of it on the person being affected and the people around them. So with that in mind, when I sat down with Brian to talk about the design of the creature, he brought a lot of his own experience into it too, where I said, like, I just kind of want to see a humanoid figure in the distance, and that's kind of all I had. Something that was in the distance, like a shadow almost, and it was going to come closer and closer and closer throughout the movie. And his idea was to pull from some of the work that he had done with veterans, which was to basically tell them, like, draw your fears, or draw what sort of haunts you. And a lot of people would draw these like humanoid creatures that were kind of in pieces, or he used that to design how the creature ended up looking. So that's why it's got like an exposed rib cage. There's like an open head wound on it. And yeah, he did some pretty gnarly stuff. And the idea was always to put some visual effects on top of it in post to make sure that it never really looked right. Like your eye never quite lands on it. So it's always a little surreal, a little ethereal. But it was good to ground it in the real world with the actors too.
And, we're talking about PTSD and so on with this, and I want to kind of circle back to that. But we really haven't discussed, like, what, can you just describe, like, what the film is about? Like, what, let's kind of go into a little bit.
Yeah, so it follows a Navy SEAL sniper team who does a lot of sort of off-the-books kind of stuff. And they are sent into Ukraine to take out the leader of a dangerous and violent militia. And in doing so, they go and take out their target, and as they're leaving, they're told, hey, you shot the wrong person. And that sort of launches this series of events that puts them directly in conflict with the militia. And they also see something in the woods that is stalking them and coming closer and closer. And the main character, John Bryant, seems to be the only one that can see it at first. And so he's trying to convince his partner, like, hey, there's something out there. There's something that's not human coming after us. And it's the two of them dealing with that, basically. Both the immediate dangers of the militia and whatever this monster might be and whatever it wants.
So why focus on PTSD?
That actually came out very organically from the story. I'm not a military person. It's never been a part of my life, or I don't want to say it wasn't of interest or anything, but it's never been a focus of mine. But as the story progressed and as I started really working on it, I realized that that's what we were talking about. I realized that, and this is a little bit spoilery for the movie, but it's been out for a while. It's fine. But, what we're talking about is not just the military, like deep in military life, but it's a very sensitive part of military life and something that people don't talk about often in this way. So, what I liked about the idea was following this one character struggling with this problem and sticking with him beginning to end. So you see that there's something off with John right from the first scene. He sees something someone else doesn't see. He says, it's fine, let's just go, and kind of buries it. But as, is the case with people suffering from PTSD, you can't just bury it. It will just keep coming back until you deal with it. And I really liked the visualizations that came through the film in that way. So that's I knew, even though it wasn't something that I had dealt with personally or even was close to personally, it was something meaningful that I could really dig into, and I really felt a way about it. So,
I think also having the stark contrast of the landscape, right? The cold environment. And I mean, there's an absence of color in that film when you really look at it. Mm-hmm. And I think that also kind of, for lack of better terms, lends itself to that idea. It almost gives, I don't want to say like a bleakness, right? But, people that are suffering PTSD can sometimes feel, hopeless. They can feel bleak. And that atmosphere, if you've ever spent a winter in Maine with snow on the ground and gray trees around you, there's like, please, like I need a little bit of hope. And I think like that landscape also adds to that level of hopelessness, of that PTSD following them.
Yeah. Yeah. There's nothing else out there except for them and the monster at one point. And I really liked the simplicity of it. It was a story that was interesting to dive into, and as I realized writing it, I had some things to say about it, and I was so nervous before it came out. I was really confident in the project, and I knew that people were going to like it, but I was nervous about the military community seeing it because I was like, man, like I'm an outsider, like, and this is a really sensitive thing, so I don't know how this is going to go. But we did a screening to benefit the Maine Veterans Project, and they were so cool and so supportive, and a guy named Doc Goodwin did a Q&A with me afterward, and I could tell he was really like impacted by it, and he pulled me aside afterward and he was like, I don't think I've ever seen a more accurate portrayal of what it feels like, and that meant a lot to me, as someone who, I did a lot of research and I read a lot and I talked to a bunch of people. So I wanted to get it right, but it felt really affirming, to hear him talk about it that way. That this movie with a monster in it is maybe the most accurate thing that he had seen. So yeah, I was really excited to hear about that.
That's cool. That's a feel good moment right there.
It really was, yeah. He also told me at one point, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go for it.
He told me at one point, when I told him, like, oh, I'm nervous about what you guys are going to think. And he was like, man, listen, if you pissed off the military community, you would know about it by now. He's like, they would have told you. That also made me feel a lot better.
Now, did you find, when you were filming up here, did you find that there was a lot of local and communal support for the film being made as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, we wouldn't have gotten the movie done if it weren't for locals stepping up and helping. I mentioned the friend of the family, and just his contribution alone, half the movie was done. So he, a guy named Dan Shaw, my brother's friend, I met with him and I said, we're looking to do this movie and we just need land, basically. So he was like, yeah, use my land. You can use my garage for base camp. You can, and I asked him like, okay, well, law enforcement, we're going to be running around with guns. So we want to make sure we're in touch with law enforcement. He's like, well, I'm a sheriff, so you can talk to me. And I was like, great. And then I said, all right, cool. Like, we're also, do you happen to know any like cabins around here? He's like, oh yeah, my friend is, she owns these cabins that are not in use in the winter. I'm sure she would let you shoot there. And I'm like, oh my God. All right, great. So we looked that up and we ended up shooting there. And then he was on the SWAT team for the area. And he said, oh, I can bring the SWAT team out and they'll be your militia. Because there's a shootout towards the end of the movie with the militia. And it's this big sprawling action scene. And we needed, I think, 12 people. And he was like, yeah, I'll just bring the SWAT team out. So, I mean, it was... I'm sitting there with the producer, and I'm like, we're getting like half the movie from this guy. Like, this is crazy. And I explained to him later, I was like, listen, because to him it was nothing. He said, oh, of course, I'll help you out. And that's a very Mainer mentality. Like, oh, it's no problem. I don't mind helping you. But, for someone who's lived in LA for almost 20 years, having that kind of just willingness and openness to help somebody else out on what they're doing is almost unheard of. So I explained it to him later, and I was like, you don't even understand how much you helped us out. And he was like, oh, yeah, whatever. So, and that's just one example of someone who really showed up. The cabin location that we were at, you could only get to it by snowmobile. And so there was a local snowmobile club in the area who offered to come in and cart us all in, like the people and the gear that we had, to and from the location. And we wouldn't have been able to do it any other way.
Yeah.
Well...
So that's awesome.
The producers and everyone else that I had brought in from LA was basically like, we got to come shoot more stuff here. This is amazing.
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Right? Bring
That would
more
be awesome.
here.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've all been trying.
Yeah. I'll have more info for you guys later, hopefully.
It would it would be nice if we had a few more incentives, but it's been tried and tried and tried.
Yeah, by me too. Since Bone Cold, man, I've been pushing because, this is a whole different conversation. I don't know if we want to get into this, but like Maine is it's got so much to offer in terms of filmmaking. There's 4 seasons, there's cities, there's coastline, there's deep forest, there's fields up north. There's pretty much anything that you'd want. So and there are a lot of people in Maine ready to make some movies, man. There's like, you could go up and crew a film right now.
Yeah. Well, let's
Absolutely.
transition to this topic. I mean, we're talking about it, right? So
Yeah.
there's been a big push for the last few years. I say last few years, probably the last 5 years, to get incentives pushed through the state house. And, I worked a film in Massachusetts in 2022. And the reason why it was made down there was because of tax incentives. It was in Greenfield, Massachusetts. And the beginning of the film, I'm not kidding, beginning of the film is supposed to be a guy hiking up Katahdin. And it's filmed at the edge of the river at Greenfield. Like, shit, man, like, I'm watching that and it's like, and of course they have to do what they have to do, right? I mean, that's just the reality of it. But, for me, I'm looking at it and go, damn, man, that, I could never sell that as Katahdin to anyone in the state of Maine because there's no mountain back there.
No.
Right.
It's crazy too. I've been talking a lot with the film commission up there and the numerous people that have sort of come in and out, and I've been trying to tell them, like, look, I've been contacted by several people after Bone Cold came out, people who are not Mainers, who watched Bone Cold and said, hey, that's beautiful. Like, what was it like to shoot up there? If I bring a project up there or whatever. And so I was saying the interest is there. The interest for people to go to Maine is there. But the reality is you have one conversation with a producer who says, what are the tax incentives? And they're not as good. They can't come anywhere near, a lot of other places where they'll say, well, you get the same terrain and you get this incentive. Like, that is money coming back. And that's a big deal for a production that's, over $1 million. That's money that goes into post. It goes into whatever. You just can't argue with that. There's a project I have right now and I can't talk too much about it, but I'm really pushing to get it shot in Maine. And the 2 producers that I have on are very good producers. They know my ties to Maine. And the conversation was, hey, I really still want to shoot this in Maine. And they're like, Kentucky is better. New Jersey is better. Massachusetts is better. And like,
Right.
I can't really argue with that because, the assets that we would need are there too. So, it's an uphill battle. But if the incentives are there, it's a different conversation.
Yeah. And, and I don't, I guess for me, I look at it and say to myself, not giving money away,
Right.
because there's no money coming into the state anyway for films.
Right.
So that's where I kind of like beat my head against the wall, as a filmmaker in the state. I worked commercial here for a while. I'm looking at this and thinking to myself, well, damn, man, it's not like there's already an industry here and you're giving them a tax break because they're already here. They're not coming here because you don't have it.
It is kind of frustrating when people think it's giving away money when it's like, no, like you don't have that money. There is no money.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we have to bring you the money first. So yeah, it's a frustrating conversation. I do think, the other side of the Mainer mentality is like, they don't want Hollywood coming in and bulldozing a neighborhood, which I absolutely understand. And I wouldn't want that either, these major productions. But if we're talking about smaller indie films, I think it could be an absolutely mutually beneficial relationship with a small movie coming in to get more bang for their buck, and these small communities getting bags of money dropped on them is how I'm going to describe it. But it's just simply that. It's simple, it's stripped down with a small production.
I worked on a film basically at the same time that you were filming Bone Cold.
That's right. Yeah.
It was called Blood and Money, and they rented out a whole motel that was basically closed for the winter for the whole month. And they rented rooms at another luxury hotel for the main actors. as well as Airbnbs for like the director and producer and stuff like that. So, and there must have been a ton of money dropped in that town just for that 1 month.
Yeah.
And it's too bad that, you can't attract that more.
Yeah, that's the thing is, I've tried to tell them, and I'm really pushing with this other movie that I want to go there, that I want to bring there. I keep saying like, hey, look, I'll give you access to our spending. I'll show you what we're laying down for the movie so that everyone can have some black and white numbers. You can see how much money is being spent where. Lodging is a huge number. Like, there are a lot of people, even on a small crew, you're talking 25 people,
Right.
And if you're not hiring locals, which I would also want to do, then you're bringing people in, you're putting them up, you're feeding them, you're entertaining them, and that's a big deal. So I am, as I'm sure all of us are, trying to get legislators to understand that we're not talking about Warner Brothers coming in and taking over or throwing their weight around. It's very much like independent filmmakers who see the potential of shooting in Maine and bringing their smaller projects to Maine, and there's a mutually supportive relationship there. Eventually it's gonna happen in some way. I even if the incentives are not where we want to get them, the last conversation I had was really encouraging. They were talking about a multi-step process over the next few years to increase the incentives, see what it does, increase them more, see what it does. And I love that idea. Any step in the right direction, I'm happy with.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I'm willing to have the fights with the producers to say, no, it's beneficial for us to go to Maine. Because the budgets we're talking about are still not in the tens of millions of dollar range, so they're still small enough we can maybe spend a little more for being up there, but we'll see how it goes.
Only time will tell.
Exactly.
Now going back to Bone Cold, I know that you filmed it just before the pandemic, so you were editing during the pandemic. How did the editing process go?
It was really hard. So we had, but that was a situation where I was really happy to have my post experience. I was still working as a post supervisor, and so essentially, Bone Cold was meant to finish in mid 2020, and had everything gone to plan, it would have been great. But lockdown happened, and basically all of the post deals that we had in place just went away because no one knew what was going to happen. And when things ramped up during the pandemic, it was only a couple weeks into lockdown, but all of a sudden every single person was way too busy because post-production, switching to remote work, everyone was working 15-hour days. And a small project like mine that I had sort of structured these deals to be, I'd gotten some really great people to work between their big projects. So I was filling the gaps of their schedules. But of course that all went, I'm the project that got pushed to the side immediately. So, which is understandable. So the whole post process came down to me at home at this desk that I'm sitting at right now, getting through the movie myself as much as I could. So that's what it was. And we had another editor on board, a great editor I'd worked with before named Art O'Leary, and he had, I don't know how many Emmys he had, 6 Emmys or something for The Deadliest Catch, and he was looking for something, he wanted to get into scripted. So I was like, dude, come do this movie with me, that'll be great. And so what ended up happening was I did the bulk of the editing, the early editing, the rough cuts, and then, I kind of did a few notes passes with everybody. And when I brought him on board, he was doing some tweaking and some finesse and some polished stuff, and he really made the whole thing sing. But the editing process, it really was just kind of down to me doing it. And it's not what I wanted to do. I can edit, and I have edited a lot, but for a movie like this that's really, it deals with reality and fantasy, you kind of have to be very specific and careful about what the audience understands and what is left vague kind of thing. So I really wanted other people's input, and I wanted another editor to sort of be on from beginning to end. It just wasn't possible. So Yeah, I was stuck here editing with a newborn and a toddler at home.
Wow,
They were the only ones giving me notes, man. It was rough. I'll tell you,
Indeed.
a filmmaker's nightmare absolutely happened one day when my little one like waddled into the room, and I have a sit-stand desk that's got little an up and a down button, and he was pushing the down button, and I was like getting changed in the other corner of the room. So I didn't see what was happening, but he was lowering my desk, and it hit the arms of my chair, and the whole desk tipped back. Oh! And I watched as my Mac and all my movie drives just slid off the back of the desk and crashed on the ground. And I just was no, and my wife came in and she got the baby, and I was like, you got to give me some time. I can't look at anybody. I can't talk to anybody. But again, my post knowledge, I knew you have to, if you're working with digital material, you have to have backups, and they have to be in the same place, you know? And so I had backups, but it took me about 2 weeks to go get the drives, reassemble the whole project, and sort of get back to where I was.
Oh my God.
So the Mac was on and the drives were running, so they just got...
Correct. The Mac ended up being totally fine. The drives, one of them smashed completely, and I knew that one was going to be gone.
Right.
The other one worked for long enough for me to copy everything over.
Oh, wow.
It's, probably 20 or 30 terabytes of material. So, like, had it all just gone away, that would have... Yeah.
Yeah, that would have been...
We would not be talking about Bone Cold right now.
I've been in post-production since 1991, and I've only had one hard drive knocked to the floor by somebody. And, yeah, it's not a good experience when you have...
No.
It was
the masters
honestly,
are gone. And it's
I knew in that moment, I was like, I'm going to be talking about this story in 25 years. Like, this is the nightmare right now. But yeah, that was a brutal day. But the process after that, it took a long time to cut. I think we ended up locking picture in 2022. And then from there it was a pretty standard process. Like, went to color correction. We did a lot of visual effects, and the mix was maybe the smoothest part of the whole movie, and like one of my favorites, because we worked with this guy named Ian Chase, who's a good friend, but he does a lot of Marvel stuff, and he spearheaded all the audio. He was the only audio person on for the whole movie. And he was pulling all these sound effects from, like, he was like, we were in the mix, and he was like, that's from Doctor Strange, that sound effect. Awesome.
Nice.
Yeah, so we were using a lot of that stuff. Yeah, it was pretty fun. But it's really great once working so long on a project and you watch it really come to life in the audio. That was an exciting time. So the great thing that happened after Bone Cold was that it opened several doors for me, and the people who would normally not return my emails were returning my emails when they saw that Bone Cold had come out, that it was distributed, and was, like you said, relatively successful. It's hard to say, like, yes, it's an overwhelming success, but it's definitely not a failure, so that's a plus. When people saw how well it was doing, they said, okay, this is a person that's making movies. Because of that, I ended up in a lot of different conversations about projects that I had, projects that were being developed that they needed a writer for. I signed with a manager at Zero Gravity, and Zero Gravity has a lot of stuff going on. So, I ended up kind of developing something with one of the producers there. And all that is to say, like, there's a lot of stuff that's up in the air. And I'm someone who's always got a lot of irons in the fire anyway. There are two projects that I think are the most likely to go. One of them I wish I could tell you about, because I will tell you right now, you will both love it. But the other one is another one that I'm sort of spearheading. And now it's got the support of Zero Gravity and another producer behind it. it's based on one of the stories in my last book. But it's this very cool, like, crime drama. And, you know, we're taking some big swings with it. And I've got a really good feeling about it. And, you know, it's still in that very early stage of putting it all together. But, you know, every little step is kind of a big deal. So, yeah, the hope is to do something that is a little more contained than Bone Cold was, because that's a pretty sprawling, you know, Winter Woods story. This one is much more contained, but we're doing it in a much bigger way.
Every filmmaker has their directors, films, right, that they pull influence from, right, that they look at for inspiration. You know, what directors do you look at and you're like those were the films that influenced the way that I make films or I write?
William Friedkin is kind of the first one that comes to mind. He's
nice.
So raw and so just grounded and real, and I feel like he starts from that place and builds out from there. Steven Soderbergh is another one. I love the way that he makes movies, even if all of his stuff is not like... I remember seeing Bubble, and Bubble is this really random little movie that he made, and honestly, I don't ever want to see it again because it was a tough watch. But I remember being fascinated with how he made it, and it's so stripped down and so grounded and realistic that it's almost too realistic. So he does a lot of interesting stuff. I also have the Limey poster right here behind me. That's Soderbergh.
Yeah.
And the more sort of pretentious answer, my favorite movie of all time is The Wages of Fear. And that director is Henry Georges Clouzot, who is sort of known as the French Hitchcock. And he did a string of movies that all of them fascinate me. The Wages of Fear, personal favorite. He did Diabolique, if you've ever seen that. It's a really great murder mystery. And, you know, all of his stuff is so taut and well-crafted that it's just awe-inspiring. And there's a great documentary about him, too, his last film that never got made because he passed away before he got to make it. But there's all this footage that exists of this experimental camera work and, you know, these depictions of insanity and lust and all these deep human emotions through the camera. It's pretty fascinating. So Clouzot is definitely one of my favorites. William Goldman, the writer, is one of the best Hollywood writers of all time. I'm sort of fascinated with his work and how pristine it all seems to be. Yeah, so those are kind of some off the top of my head. And you know who I keep coming back to a lot too is Catherine Bigelow. Like her movies I find so compelling. Like Near Dark is also one of my favorite horror movies. And that's a movie that doesn't really get talked about too much, but the atmosphere of it and the tone of it, it's so overwhelming in a way.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are some solid people to pull your inspiration from. And also it's a broad range.
Yeah.
So many people, I feel like when they pick or they have that, it's very specific genres and very specific, you know, like it is very close together. Like those directors, you could be like, oh, like that film looks the same as that film looks the same as that film looks the same. Where you just chose directors that have these broad ranges.
Yeah, I think that's very much who I am. You know, I have come up a lot in the horror space and like the suspense and thriller space. But I think one of my best scripts is a comedy. And that got me a lot of attention at one point. And so, yeah, I myself have a pretty broad range of things that I approach. And I think, you know, the better you are at romance and comedy, you know, it also plays into the suspense and the drama that you do. And so for me personally, I want to approach every story with that broad range of storytelling.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on the podcast and giving us the insights into what you like, what you're going to do, and what you've been doing. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on. It's been fun.
Yeah, it's been great. Thank you, Billy. And best of luck to you. And we look forward to seeing what you got coming up down the pipeline.
Awesome, man. I'll keep you guys updated for sure.
If you enjoyed this episode of Cinema and Suds, be sure to subscribe and like. You can find all episodes on Spotify and YouTube. And if you'd like to watch Bill Hanson's Bone Cold, you can find it for free on the RoKu channel.